Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is facing steep opposition from the Democratic establishment, and now political action groups are joining the push to keep him from getting on the ballot. Friend of the show and podcaster Sabrina Salvati highlighted the extent of this effort, specifically groups wrangling voters via text to thwart RFK Jr.'s run. In a recent tweet, Sabby denounced this, saying, quote, "They're already kicking people or texting people to kick RFK Jr. off the ballot. I don't support his campaign, but this is wild." Here to dig deeper into the anti-RFK Jr. camp is Sabrina. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So it sounds like this text that came through, "I'm begging, can you sign the petition to ban Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the ballot," came from Progressive Turnout PAC. Do you think it's going to increase voter turnout by kicking candidates off of the Democratic primary ballot, especially for progressives? What do you make of this?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of Americans aren't even paying attention to the political landscape right now. So some of them, I think a lot of them don't even know that this is happening, to be honest. But this particular organization, Progressive Turnout PAC, they are aligned with the Democratic Party. I think it's important for people to know that one of the individuals that has donated heavily to this particular organization is Dustin Moskowitz. Now, Dustin is a co-founder of Facebook. So here you have a social media platforms donating to political organizations. Now, why should that be concerning for people? If we go back to the interview that Mark Zuckerberg had with Joe Rogan, he explained that it was political. The Democratic Party reached out to them and said that they did not want them to feature the Hunter Biden laptop story. They wanted them to suppress that organization. So here you have social media platforms working hand in hand with the Democratic Party. And this is very much a problem. You can see this, I think it's going to escalate in 2024 as to whether or not what they decide, who they're going to platform and who they're going to suppress. But that text message did come through. A number of people have received that text message as well. And I think everybody should be concerned, whether you support RFK Jr.'s campaign or not. Who were they to tell you to kick someone off of the ballot? So this is very concerning.
Certainly, and it's deeply undemocratic. I mean, this is the nomination to figure out who's going to be the Democratic Party's candidate. What is the DNC, what is the Biden camp afraid of? Are they actually afraid of this challenge from RFK Jr.? Is this evidence of that?
I believe so. Unfortunately, a lot of the Democrat politicians that have been heavily preaching about protecting our democracy, which I would argue we don't have a real democracy, but those individuals actually just want you to vote for the candidate that the Democratic Party has selected. And the candidate that they've selected is Joe Biden. They believe that just because he's already sitting in the Oval Office, that we should just hand over re-election to him and that he should not have any type of challenge, whether it's from the Democratic Party or third party or independent. And that's really unfortunate, but this is how this game works. And I think hopefully more people will wake up to this and push back against the Democratic Party for being, trying to do this and being so vocal about it early on. It shows you that they're very much afraid that Joe Biden could lose re-election. But I think people need to understand we have to start looking at solutions in reference to this type of situation. There are two things that you can do. Number one, you can stop doing their bidding. Stop voting for the candidate that they select and tell you should vote for just because that person fits the status quo and is backed by Wall Street and the military-industrial complex. And two, for those of you that live in states that are ballot initiative states, you should run BI measures to publicly finance elections. Now, this is something that needs to start at the local level because in 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that corporations are people that are entitled to buy elections. So we're going to have to start working on this locally. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party selects the candidate that they want, and anyone who goes outside of that status quo, they'll do whatever they can to make sure that they don't win. Look at what happened during the Democratic primary debates in 2020. Throughout the debates, they changed the rules so that some candidates could be removed, like Tulsi Gabbard, and so that the candidates that they want could join, like Mike Bloomberg. We don't have a real democracy. If we had a real democracy, third-party candidates wouldn't have to fight so hard to get on the ballot. They wouldn't be trying to kick people off of the ballot. It's really a disgrace. Here it is 2023, and this is the way our political system operates.
For sure. Yeah, well, speaking of third-party candidates, according to recent polling from Monmouth University, 30% of registered voters said they they would be open to choosing a third-party candidate in the 2024 election. When asked whether he's scared for the Biden-Harris ticket, Congressman Jim Clyburn couldn't even hide his sentiments on third parties. Here he is on MSNBC. Let's watch.
Bill Clinton became president of the United States with only 42%. Ross Perot was a third-party candidate. He got a big number, and it helped Bill Clinton. I don't think Bill Clinton would have got elected were it not for a third party. So I'm not getting all exercise over whether or not there is a third-party candidate. I don't think there should be. I'm against what there's no labels people are doing. I think some of them are just playing games. They're not being transparent to American people. We don't know where their money is coming from, and they won't tell us where the money is coming from.
Meanwhile, journalist for the Gray Zone, Max Blumenthal, took to Twitter saying, quote, "The Dems are going to try to bribe Cornell to drop out, offering some shiny position as dean or department head with mountains of donor money promised to the university. If that fails, they will resort to the time-tested tactic of voter suppression and calling him a Russian asset." What do you make of Max Blumenthal's take there? I think that's pretty in line with how we see the Democratic establishment act. You know, I worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and the way they treated him is not so different from how they're treating RFK Jr. and how they just tend to treat any candidate that comes in from outside of the establishment. Do you see this playbook, continuing to work for the Democratic establishment?
I think as long as the American people buy in it, they'll continue to do it. I think Max is 100% correct there. They will try to find ways to get Cornel West to drop out. But luckily, Cornel West did come from the Bernie campaign, so he saw what was done to Bernie Sanders. I think he's very well aware of what they're going to try to do to him. But I think what's really interesting, if you look at someone like Dennis Kucinich, who is now RFK Jr.'s campaign manager, the Democratic Party did this to him, and he was a sitting politician. Dennis Kucinich was considered to be progressive at that point in time. They did not like his views, particularly a view that he had in reference to Israel and Palestine. And so what did they try to do? When he continued to win, the Democratic Party decided to redistrict his district so that he didn't have one. The cruddy things that they will do to get their way and to get the people and the voices that they want in is not democratic. And no, we do not have a real democracy in this country. But they will try to do this to Cornel West. And just wait for it. It's only 2023. Come 2024, they are going to ramp up the smears against RFK Jr. and Cornel West. Now, Cornel West is a little bit harder for them to push back on because he is beloved by so many people. But they do consider him to be a real threat, considering the fact that he is someone who is very well known. He did come from the Bernie campaign, and a lot of people do love Dr. West. So it's really hard for them to ignore him as they have other third-party candidates. But I think now is the time for people to really make their voices heard and to stop just voting for the candidates that they selected for you and telling you that you should vote for.
I think that's what the mainstream and the establishment don't understand about third-party voters, including myself, that those votes aren't necessarily in play for major party tickets that are not speaking to the issues that third-party voters care about. So the just like assumption that, well, if there wasn't this third-party challenger, if there wasn't Cornel West or whoever the Green Party nominee ends up being or whoever the Libertarian Party nominee ends up being, those voters would just naturally go to either the Republican or the Democrat, when many of those voters would just not vote or would write in the name of someone they liked. Or, they might, some would go one way, some would go another. But this just presumption that those votes belong to an establishment party is actually so contrary to the way discerning third-party voters actually think. And I don't think the establishment understands that.
No, I don't think they do. For those who voted for people like Jill Stein or Ralph Nader, those people would have just stayed home. And I think that's what they really have to understand. This idea that you would have voted for Hillary Clinton if Jill Stein was not on the ticket, that doesn't make any sense. If you wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton, you would have voted for Hillary Clinton, regardless if there was a Jill Stein on the ballot. But they have to invoke this fear in the American people because they really want people to stay within the duopoly. They don't want you to vote for someone who's running third party or independent. Here we are, in the world, how many other countries have multiple parties where it's just normal for you not to stay within a two-party system? But here in the United States, they want to keep the status quo. And all of these politicians, at the end of the day, they do belong to corporations. They belong to the military-industrial complex. They're just puppets, so to speak. So there's a puppet that is selected by the Democratic Party, and that's the person they want you to support. How can they tell people that you should just reelect Joe Biden right now when Joe Biden is having difficulty speaking? Joe Biden is having difficulty standing. It is very clear that he is not fit to be president of the United States, but they want you to go with it anyway. That's how embarrassing our politics is in this country at this point in time.
Sabrina, Salvati, Sabby, Sabs, thank you for breaking this down with us. We've got more Rising after this.
Thank you.